This is Jim Pete, the host of the EHC podcast at WFNY, and today Michael Hattery and I are going to be stepping away from the positional previews to dive right into spring training. While the 25-man roster appears set, there are some storylines down in Arizona that are worth talking about. For one, we've got Jason Kipnis in the shoulder. We have Yandy Diaz, who is trying to lay claim to a spot on that 25-man roster, but is nursing a groin injury. Mike and I will take a look at why he does or doesn't deserve a spot on that 25-man roster. We'll look at Jose Ramirez and Francisco Lindor and whether or not the Indians are planning on signing them long-term, and why Lindor and Ramirez might not want to sign long-term yet. We're also going to take a look at probably the biggest piece of news from spring training, and that's Bradley Zimmer and that swing. It's looking really good after some swing changes that he was putting in place last year, which may account for that 37% K rate. Is it something that's going to be long-term? Mike and I will take a deep dive into that in this podcast, but before we do, I want to talk to you about two ways you can help out WFNY. The first is becoming a patron at Patreon. How can you do that? Head on over to www.patreon.com/WFNY. There we have multiple tiers that you can join. Head on over to www.patreon.com/WFNY. The other way you can help us out is to head on over to iTunes. You can subscribe to the site, which will get you our multiple podcasts a month. We're talking 15 to 20 podcasts a month at this point with several different hosts, several different guests, and we cover it all. Cavs, Browns, and of course, the Cleveland Indians. You can also give us a 5-star rating, give us a good review, and what that does is it promotes our podcast, lets everyone know that we're the best, and that's a free way to push the podcast to the top of the Cleveland rankings. All right, enough promoting the site. Let's get on with it. Spring training with the Cleveland Indians.
This is EC3 with TNA Wrestling and EHC. Everyone hates Cleveland, but why? The world needs Cleveland.
Welcome to another edition of Everyone Hates Cleveland, the podcast. This is the podcast in which we aren't going to talk about positional previews because while we only have one left to do, we just want to do something different because we're human beings and we, need to challenge ourselves with new and different things. Plus, there's a lot to talk about. We got spring training going on. And while there are lots of other Indians podcasts out there, you need to listen to this one because we have more fun and we talk about beer on occasion and we yell and scream and we actually sound like we do this because we've done, Mike, we're probably closing in on 150 of these, don't you think?
I thought we were at 200, Jim.
Well, I know we had, close to 80 at EHC and I want to say we had more than that with the CSI podcast. So we've got to be pushing 200. You're right. We're like big deals in our own minds.
I certainly am. I wake every morning thinking about myself.
oh man, this could really.
I'm trying my best, Jeff Nomina. Like I know that he's having like a rough week, and I'm just trying to do this work for him. He needs it. I'm doing what I can.
I'm not saying nice things about Jeff Nomina. I'm not doing it. I need to have a beer with Jeff Nomina. I need to do it before Conway's goes away. I need to do it, and it needs to happen this week. And I don't care about illness, sickness, or excuses. It needs to happen. And I've not made any excuses in the past, and it's my podcast, and he can't say a damn thing about it.
Yep. Basically, yes.
All right, Mike, I'm going to start this off with baseball. If you want to segue into other directions, that's up to you. But I want to start off with Jason Kipnis. Kipnis had a great year last year. When you talk about a guy, entering the realm of 30 and you start mentioning the term shoulder, I mean, it's a minor injury and don't get me wrong, but Kipnis has basically been shut down. He hasn't played in the field. He's been DHing a little bit. Of course, over the next, few weeks, he's going to be kind of meandering his way back into the regular lineup, especially in the field. But does this make you nervous? Or, I know it's precautionary, but help old man Jim, who's worried about everything, help me feel at ease with Jason Kipnis' shoulder.
I can't. So
damn it, Mike! Damn you!
So here's the thing, though. This is something we don't want to talk about, and because most of the offseason we've been just like circling the wagons because of how deep this team is, how much offensive sort of like skill there is sitting at AAA getting ready to come up. There's depth there, but the Cody Anderson and Jason Kipnis injuries, while they're not like Kluber and Lindor being like having broken arms, Indians are having a sneaky bad spring training. Like the Kipnis thing is a frustrating thing. It's really dangerous for them. He's really productive. He's pretty stable offensively, and yeah, I mean, I don't know. We've seen enough shoulder, elbow issues to not be particularly thrilled by this. It's not great. It's not great.
We have, over the past several years, been proponents of playing around a little bit with Jason Kipnis in the field because, of course, there are other guys. I don't know. There's this other guy who's been known to be a really good second baseman, and I can't remember his name. What's his name? Oh, yeah, JRam. JRam. Anyways, there are the bonus with the Kipnis injury, if it does turn out to be something that's chronic and we need to worry about as the year progresses. We do have an alternative at third base and a guy like Yandy Diaz and your favorite guy, Giovanni Urshela, should that occur. Okay, so maybe not your guy, but we do have alternatives. Defensively, I think we both can agree Giovanni Urshela can play the position should we need to, but Yandy Diaz is probably the guy if they have to go long term. The bonus is we have guys there, but when you're talking about a guy like Kipnis who has been known to have struggled as the year progresses, to start the year off with a shoulder injury, and while people are worrying about the defense, I mean, for me, it's offensively because I wrote a piece earlier this year about how Kipnis has very smartly changed his game to kind of fit how he's being pitched, maybe fit where he's at in the lineup. When you talk about shoulder injuries, it doesn't matter if it's your lead shoulder or your drive shoulder. Can he get drive? Can he have power when he comes back? This is not a good thing for a guy who plays his heart out, is blue collar, and then gets to September and struggles with, I don't know, is it stamina? I don't know. But when you have a bum shoulder coming out of spring, so Mike, I'm going to ask you to do this again. It's precautionary, right?
Nothing's precautionary.
Oh, you're killing me, man.
Here's what I know. And I want to mention this. On February 23rd, we were told from a Jordan Bastion tweet or something like this, February 23rd around there, that we're shutting Kipnis down. It's just precautionary, just to like keep him fresh because he his shoulder wears down and stuff during the year. And the next day, it's all of a sudden, we have an injury. He's going to get a shot. He's so to me, like, I think this is more of a thing than we want to talk about. I mean, are we like, we're at a decent clip here where he hasn't played, right? Like, what's the timeline?
Yeah, I think he just played in a game Thursday as a DH. So he is swinging the bat, which is a good sign. So perhaps they are just taking it easy. Maybe it's a case of they've learned their lesson with how Michael Brantley was handled, whether it's a Brantley deal or a team deal or a both deal, and they're just being cautionary. I mean, he's 29 years old. Old man Kipnis. All right, let's get to our main focus of this podcast. I do want to talk about Yandy Diaz. I do want to talk about Greg Allen. I do want to talk about Michael Brantley. But Mike, you've been at the forefront, and maybe all of us EHC guys have kind of followed suit with regards to Bradley Zimmer. And when you have a 37% plus K rate at AAA, it gets concerning as you move forward to the big league level. We've talked about this at length. You've got several. We've both kind of touched upon it. You were at the forefront of this, though. Over the past week, Jordan Bastion had a piece come out looking specifically at swing changes. And you and I, off the air, took a look at those swing changes. And as we were taking a look at those swing changes, we also he happened to hit another home run, an opposite field shot in a spring game. It does appear that the swing is different, and we can get into the mechanics of that in a second. The bonuses of this is he's still a young guy, and we've seen swing mechanics change appearance of players over the years. The most recent probably is Clint Frazier, who was going through some swing changes at AA. Over the span of the first 3 months of a season. We saw those start to kind of click into place during the latter half, and then he took off. I believe it was the 2015 season, and then, of course, the 2016 season, he kind of launched himself as our best prospect before he got dealt. Are we seeing the same thing with Bradley Zimmer? Zimmer, who's older than Frazier, did it in a very odd time. I mean, you don't generally see massive swing changes happen during the AAA year. Usually you see it happen prior. What are your thoughts on this? His swing does look different. Are you buying in, or are you still thinking no?
Well, I wasn't. My thing with Zimmer and why I wrote these was, man, I just want some nuance in the world. That's all I want. Like, come on.
Well, you weren't alone. I mean, we joined in.
And everybody hopped on, and it was just sort of saying, like, look, like Zimmer has some really cool tools, but also like this is a huge risk thing that he needs to curb, which is why he's going through this swing adjustment. And so I'm stuck on this island where I don't feel like I'm an island. To me, I feel like my point was, unless this gets curbed, like it really sort of sets a pretty tough ceiling on what is a really good tool set. I mean, he has a ton of power. He's really athletic. I think that can really play up. But you talked about it, and I think I'm becoming more and more optimistic than I have been in the past on Zimmer's ceiling. I've always sort of liked that power floor at an outfield position. I think like you hit 20 home runs, play right field, okay, like you're going to be fine. Like you walk a little bit, you're going to be. But I think this sort of changes sort of my thought process as to what his ceiling could be. I think it sort of raises it. And the adjustment's been good so far. We have a super small sample, but he has 5 Ks and 30 PAs in spring training versus striking out, Normally he'd strike out about 12 times in 30 PAs, so that's positive. And once we get to 60 PAs, I think we can sort of, that's when K percentage sort of stabilizes. But, I think Zimmer has looked like he had much better control of the bat head and so far. And I think you can talk about, one of the things I noticed, Jim can talk a lot more mechanically than I did, but I think I think his base looks a little bit better. I think he starts a little more open, which is sort of a big key, and he just looks more in balance. But I think there's some rhythmic stuff that you can talk about that I think would be really insightful.
Yeah, and we're going to, and just to kind of put it out there, Bastian wrote the piece 3 or 4 days ago, and Mike and I are planning on kind of following up on Jordan's piece, which we'll make sure to link said piece to ours to kind of take it to the next level. But I think if you look at his swing, while it's a lower body change, I mean, you see changes, as you mentioned, Mike, he's opened up in the stance, which is the lower body piece, kind of that trigger mechanism. His hands start off lower. And what's amazing about his swing is if you look at his swings, and you made a great point as we looked at it, and like I said, we'll reference Jordan's piece in this podcast. We'll also reference it in the piece that we have coming out next week when WFNY's preseason preview starts on Monday. But I think the thing that you need to notate about the swing, Mike, and you noticed it right away, is that the first tweet that Jordan sent out, we were looking at an inside pitch and an outside pitch. And was his Army swing, where he looked like he was using more arms, just a factor of where the pitch was thrown? That Akron video, or the Akron photo shots that he had in that tweet were an outside pitch, and it looked very much like it was perhaps even an off-speed pitch, and it looked all arms. The irony is, as you and I were kind of bantering about that, we got to see what his swing looked like through an outside pitch as he took a fastball away to the opposite field, and and it looked exactly like the swing that we saw in another Jordan Bastian tweet, an inside pitch that he had taken this spring deep as well. I've looked since then at several of his swings, and they all uncannily look the same. And this is where I start to get excited. When you start to see the lower body in unison with the upper body, when you take away a big hitch and you're not just using your arms, and you're seeing that kind of drive through the ball, and you're seeing it on inside pitches, on outside pitches, and he's able to hold back on off-speed pitches, which it looks like he's doing. Oh, man, it starts to get a little bit exciting. Repetition is key, but it looks like the Indians franchise seems to be kind of talking about that said repetition. I don't think he's going to break camp with the team, but Francona mentioned yesterday that guys like Greg Allen and Bradley Zimmer are getting repetition because they need things to lock into place, and it does seem like the organization is in unison. Obviously, we'll be able to talk a lot better on paper about this, because without being able to see it in a podcast, it's hard to kind of talk about the exact mechanics. But if you watch his swing, watch how that outside step moves in, watch how he lifts his leg as a kind of to kind of counterbalance a former hitch in his swing. And that bat is so smooth now, whereas before he was 100, almost, I would say 80-20, 80% arms, 20% body through a swing. And he just looked, in comparison, kind of foolish in previous years. So it'll be fun watching this as it develops, Mike. And listen, let's be honest. I mean, you mentioned his power. You mentioned, a guy that plays in the outfield, potentially as a right fielder, but this guy also has plus speed. If he can put it all together, you start thinking about a tall guy who can play the outfield. Now, he's not Grady Sizemore. Let's just get that out there now, because that's going to be the comp that people have, because he's a tall center fielder right now. But, he certainly is probably going to end up playing right. But, man, you start thinking about the intangibles. Mike, back to you. If he can put it together, if he's a guy who's striking out 20% of the time instead of 37% of the time, or even 25% of the time instead of 35% of the time, I mean, we're talking about a top 20 prospect. And I'm not talking about the Indians. I'm talking about Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I mean, if he can curb the K rate, if we can post 25% or less in AAA in a decent sample, I'll be back to all in. I'll push the chips in because the other tools are really solid. I mean, it'd be phenomenal.
Yeah, but I think we'll have a prospect rankings come out prior to that, which will have him not where people think we will. But I don't know. We'll see when those eventually come out. All right, let's move on to a couple of other things. Do you have anything else you wanted to say about Zimmer? I mean, I think that's probably been the most interesting piece of this spring thus far, on the positive side of things. I mean, when you have a roster that seems set, when you have a guy who's going to supplement that roster at some point in 2017, that does seem to be the lightning rod of the offseason. But did you have anything more you wanted to say that? I mean, long term, how often do we see prospects at the age of 25 or 26 have these types of swing mechanics lock in and have a percentage decrease from 37% in any significant manner? I mean, he's going against the grain if it happens.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think it's a good way to sort of like level in that, both Jim and I are somewhat optimistic about the changes, but I think the reality is, these are really tough changes to make, and the probability isn't great that he really does anything more than a small marginal improvement on this skill. But it looks good so far, and that's sort of like all we can say, I guess. But yeah, I think it's really good to emphasize the fact that these sort of adjustments are really clearly just brutal to make. And yeah, but on another note, I want to be somewhat positive about something else, which is
I have no idea.
As much as I talked about how like torturous the Kipnis and Anderson injuries are, and how the Indians haven't had a great spring training, I think one of the positives is Allen, Diaz, and Zimmer taken together have all put together, just really phenomenal plate appearances and just look super comfortable and look pretty ready. Diaz has like 5 walks and 14 plate appearances. He's making good contact. He looks like a physical specimen we've never seen before. He may be a cyborg. And, Allen's looked really good too. None of them have been really showing a lot of whiff issues, facing, higher quality pitching. They played fine defensively. I think one of the really positive things is that the 3 guys who are position players who we think are close haven't shown any more warts for us to worry about so far.
The only ding on any of these guys is the fact that Yandy Diaz has that groin issue, and which really sucks, because I really wanted to make a push for Diaz making this roster, but I think that this groin injury, the same groin injury that he had, I guess, last spring, is going to probably hinder that. But, I mean, listen, I wrote the big piece last Monday, kind of my precursor to my corner starting this week, but I mean, I'm still groin or no groin. I mean, that's going to be the name of that's going to be the name of the podcast. I mean, listen, and I'm going to let you talk about this, Mike, because I mean, you talked to Dave Wallace this spring, and he's talking about contact rate, and the two guys that he brought up were, Yandy Diaz 1, Greg Allen 2. I mean, to me, groin or no groin, this is a guy who has always been able to make good contact. The bonus with this is that he's also got the eye to take a lot of walks, kind of in that Carlos Santana mold. This is a guy that gets on base in the minor leagues at we're looking at a 400 clip. I mean, this is a guy 40% of the time that's getting on base. Listen, size-wise, and as you look at him, you can see that they probably have had a conversation with him and said, look, you're not going to be playing middle infield. You're going to be playing corners, so get bigger. I mean, this is a guy who looks like he's trying to add power to his swing. We haven't really gotten to see that because he hasn't been on the field a whole lot. With the contact rate, Mike, regardless of health, I mean, the groin's going to heal itself. He's going to be back in this lineup in spring. Listen, I mean, we do agree with Yandy Diaz in one respect. I mean, this is a guy who should be breaking camp with the Indians. I know you're more, I mean, and this, we're really nitpicking here, but you're probably more of he needs to start for Brantley if Brantley doesn't make the club. He's one of our 25 best players. And as we were talking on Twitter the other day, a top 20 guy, I mean, right now he should be on the roster. I mean, I'm just going to say it. I'm going to let you talk about the whys. I don't care if it's a utility guy. I don't care if it's starting. I don't care if he's pitching. This guy should be one of our top 25 players. The fact that he's not, and I'm so sick of hearing this, he needs to have regular at-bats. Bullshit. This is a guy, and I'm going to let you talk about the contact piece. This is a guy who's going to figure out a way to get on base no matter what happens, no matter how many reps he gets. He's 25, going on 26. This is a guy who gets how to get on base. He's going to get at-bats. Guess when? I don't know. I guess they get at-bats in between. I don't think, Mike, they sit on their hands. This is a guy in elite condition playing Major League Baseball. He doesn't need reps in Columbus. Sorry. So let's find out if he's a quad A guy, but I don't know. Giving him the chance he's earned as the utility guy, he can do that. And, oh, by the way, Jose Ramirez can be an middle infield guy. I digress. Mike, to you, because I'm getting pissed.
Jeez. I hate when I have to be the calm guy.
I know. I'm turning you into the calm guy, which is just ridiculous.
In this buddy comedy, it's just like it seems like I shouldn't have to do that all the time. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems like Yandy Diaz, worst case scenario. His floor to me is like a platoon right-handed bat who crushes left-handed pitching and can play three different positions competently. And I'm sorry, that's just so much better than Michael Martinez. And the other thing is, this roster is so damn versatile that people keep looking at this like a traditional utility spot. And one of the things I sort of confined myself the other day, because the Indians had sort of, Bastion wrote that, Eric Gonzalez, Ronnie Rodriguez, and Michael Martinez were sort of the guys being discussed for the utility role. And I sort of argued for Gonzalez because I said, look, this guy at least hits right-handed pitching, and I can find myself to that list instead of discussing Yandy because I, felt that was the choice I had to make. And
Right. Well, and it's
whatever. And I said, you go with the guy who has the most sort of versatility, but also has some offensive value, because the Indians have so many of these guys that it allows Francona to sort of mix and match and constantly have platoon advantages. And so to me, you don't need that guy. If Lindor needs 10 games off the season, Jose Ramirez can play shortstop. And if Lindor gets hurt, then you have a totally different problem. But if you're talking about the fill-in time, Lindor is going to play 155 games. Ramirez can fill those. And then the best way to rest Ramirez, you plug in Yandy Diaz at third base. He's legit third baseman. He can play there defensively, and he's fine offensively. So to me, that makes the most sense in terms of versatility in the infield. And then, Diaz can play the outfield. And, hey, you have a couple of left-handed – what do you have? Almonte, Naquin, Chisenhall all hit right-handed pitching, and only Geyer really crushes left-handed pitching. Who crushes left-handed pitching? Yandy Diaz. So I think there's pretty easy versatility argument that, Diaz is the guy, and you don't really have to, add Michael Martinez, who's, at this point probably a below average defender at second shortstop, or average and historically bad offensive player. So maybe we can just admit that baseball's changing and we don't need to Like, we don't need John McDonald anymore. Like, the John McDonald role doesn't exist on this Indians team because they're so damn versatile.
Yeah, well, and, and that's the thing. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I keep getting he's not good defensively. And I mean, if you read my piece from last Monday and even in your piece, Mike, where you were making the case for Egon, I think, who has ever said that Yandy Diaz can't play third base defensively? I mean, who? Like, we get these random media heads talking about it. Occasionally you'll get, in Francona's defense, when he said it, it seemed like he was talking about the outfield, which is fair because he's played less than 60 games in the outfield in his life. Now it's probably more taking into winter ball. But, I mean, the guy can play third base. I've seen it. I've seen it with my own two eyes. And I'm sorry, if you don't believe me, believe all the managers in High A, the High A Carolina League, believe all the managers in the Midwest League where he played with Akron. It's every league he's played in as a strict third baseman. They've said he's good defensively. I mean, I'm not making this up. He can play third base defensively. And yes, Jose Ramirez isn't our best shortstop, but he's definitely serviceable. And of course, as you mentioned, heaven forbid Francisco Lindor gets hurt. In that case, then you have Gonzalez down there to bring up. But Yandy would already be here. He's going to get regular at-bats. I mean, if Yandy Diaz makes this roster, 3 games a week, 4 games a week, Mike?
4 easy.
Yeah, I mean, again.
4 easy.
Yeah, so you start talking about the outfield and who Yandy Diaz should be out there ahead of. And, I mean, I'm not going to name names right now. I could. But there are guys out there that regularly that I would probably rather have him there instead of in the outfield. Now, maybe not defensively. I haven't really seen him out there a lot, so I don't know that to be true. But, again, as you said on Twitter, Mike, the 20th player on our roster? He's not the 25th guy. And, we don't need 25th guys anymore because we have Jose Ramirez, who's probably eyeballing a whole lot of money if he has another really good season this year, but that's for another day. I want to wrap things up, Mike. I promise I keep it short. I do want to touch upon one thing, and I was going to write pieces about this, but I think it's better left unsaid since it's probably not going to happen. Should the Indians be signing Francisco Lindor and Jose Ramirez to as long a deal as possible this spring? And is it likely that their agents are saying, are you kidding me? Why would we sign a long-term deal when you guys in 4 and 3 seasons are going to be making just a whole buttload of money? We don't want you signing a deal taking you into free agency, which scares the hell out of me, by the way. What are the chances the Indians are never going to be able to sign Jose Ramirez and Francisco Lindor to long-term deals because their long-term deals are ultimately going to be massive, but the counter is risk, might get hurt.
Yeah, I mean, they're both still so young. Like, honestly, you're telling me you can't flap like $50 million in front of their faces and get it done? Like, Lindor, like, I get it, but he's 4 years away from the free agent market, or is he 5? Like, if I was 23 years old and somebody said, you know what, we're going to lock in $50 million for your lifetime earnings at the very worst, I'd be like, oh, okay. Cool. So yeah, I think they should still be able to get it done. I'd like to see them be really aggressive. Like, Lindor, I don't think we talk enough about the fact that, like, Cleveland has needed a star baseball player and a face of the franchise for a long time. And even when I love Travis Hafner and love Sizemore, and Sizemore had that same potential. Like, Sizemore was the face of that team, and I think a healthy Sizemore sort of would have impacted attendance and, like, baseball in Cleveland from 2007 to 2012. And I think Lindor is sort of this guy who, like, he's a legitimate star, and he's not only just a star caliber player, he is a star entertainer. He's Hollywood. He's that guy, and so I think, like, for the Indians in baseball in Cleveland, no long-term contract has been more important in the last 15 years than trying to extend Francisco Lindor.
Adam Burke keeps promoting and pushing, and anybody who says it after him is useless, and including myself. But I wouldn't be opposed to a lifetime deal. And well, I think all of that has been said in jest because nobody in their right mind would ever offer such a deal. Someone said $200 million to me right now over the next 10 to 15 years. As insane as that sounds, I think I would be all in on that. I don't think I would blink twice, but I don't know. I think this is going to be the most interesting thing over the next season, especially if they don't get anything done between now and, say, the All-Star break, which is tends to be their window. If they don't get anything done, I think if they're having big seasons, listen, if Jose Ramirez has a second season like the one he had last year, I mean, we're looking at maybe not even a light version of Jose Altuve, and you can look at the deal he signed, and Francisco Lindor, I think we can agree is his potential is above that, especially considering his age, which is saying something. We're talking about, when I was researching, writing a piece about long-term deals, like Lindor is avant-garde. There aren't many guys his age who's put up the numbers that he's put up who've signed long-term deals. Andrelton Simmons, but he was a Super 2 guy, so it's even hard to compare him since the Indians don't have to worry about that with Lindor. So, and I think we can both agree that Lindor offensively is way better than Simmons, and defensively is in the same breath. So, Lindor's deal would be brand new and big. I don't know Simmons' contract off the top of my head. I think it's in the upper 50s. I think that Lindor's deal would be big after what they did this offseason. I thought that it was a lock and loaded thing that they would be offering him a deal, but they got to watch themselves with Jose Ramirez. I get it. Maybe you're a little concerned about his body type, and maybe there's a little Baerga in there, but he seems to be a worker. We've seen some video of him and the Dominican. This is a guy who's working on his skill all the time. They got to watch, because if Ramirez has another year like last year, he's pricing himself fairly high. You can look at the Kipnis deal and see what kind of deal we're looking at, I guess. I don't know, Mike. Should the Indians do this now? Are you worried at all? Listen, we're both on the JRam bandwagon. You're driving it. I'm steering the back end.
No, you're driving it too. We're driving a lot.
But listen, are they gambling with this? Are they gambling with a guy like Jose Ramirez because they think that perhaps he has a little bit of regression this year, as a lot of people have been stating? And are we looking at a guy in Jose Ramirez who's even now still a lot better than people think?
Yeah, I think they're gambling. But I also think, he has one fantastic season coming off a season which he struggled a little bit. I think the pedigree that exists in terms of his quality sort of like pointed to a season like this. So I think it's a gamble. But I still think they can throw enough money in their faces to lock these guys up long term if they have another good year. And I also think that probably the conversations have begun, and I don't think Ramirez has necessarily rebuffed them, but I think this is something that the Indians haven't sort of just ignored this offseason. I think it's a conversation they probably had.
So there we go. I think it's going to be an interesting kind of walk down the path. I think these are two players defensively the Indians need. Obviously, offensively, they're cogs, and Jose Ramirez is face of the franchise as Francisco Lindor is. The interesting kind of other side of the coin piece of Jose Ramirez being kind of a glue player that can play well in the infield and the outfield. And anywhere in the lineup you put him, he's going to be effective with that surprising power that he showcased last year. It's going to be fun to see what the Indians do with all of this added revenue off of their season ticket sales and off of playoff performance. So as we kind of head down that path, while the Encarnacion signing was a huge deal here in Cleveland, boy, oh boy, how big would it be if they could wrap up their two young stars to long-term deals, especially if they can get 2 years of their free agency. Man, I don't know. I'd be really excited about that. All right. Anything else you want to talk about here, Mike, before we wrap it up? We finally got to talk about something other than positional previews. Any kind of wild card things you want to throw out there?
Not really. I don't know. I'm not pissed about anything, so I think we're good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could talk about the WBC, and I could rant about that. Well,
I'm pretty pissed about that. I take that back. You know what? I'm so is there a more meaningless event in the world? Like, and I get it. Like, we're trying to get other nations to get into baseball. Cool. I'm really sick of watching like Lindor get hit by a pitch, Miller get warmed up, and put down in the bullpen 3 times, and Roberto Perez receiving. Like, I'm done with it. It's not great. It's the worst.
It's quaint, Mike. It's quaint. It's goodwill. It's goodwill towards all men, and we got.
I don't have time for quaint anymore. I don't care about quaint.
Wait, Mike, we got to see a walk-off 10-run rule last night. It was like I was watching Little League. It was great. Exactly. I'm sorry. Why do I have to like this? I don't want to. Like, why? I said something about not liking it on Twitter, and I got a little bashed by it. Come on. It's the World Baseball. Who cares? I mean, give me a break. God. And if Andrew Miller gets hurt, everybody's going to hate it. Let's just get it out there. Oh, Jim, there's no stats that prove that anyone gets hurt. Shut up! If they get hurt, they get hurt. Okay. I feel better. I need to yell more. Maybe less.
Okay.
On a serious note, we have our preview coverage starting on Monday. I don't know. This may be coming out on Monday. I'm not sure. If it's already Tuesday, then just ignore all of this. Make sure you check it out. Of course, every Monday will be Corner of Carnegie in Ontario, and on Tuesday, Let's Argue. Mike and I have a piece I know we're going to be working on about Bradley Zimmer's swing. We're going to be talking about the infield, the outfield. I've got some other stuff in the works, too, for the weekends, and we'll be busy writing stuff over the next 3 weeks as we head towards opening day and, of course, beyond. So while EHC, the site, is dead, the podcast will keep it alive. And, of course, at WFNY, we will give you the best Indians commentary there is. All you have to do is check it out so that you can believe me so I don't sound like I'm ranting and egotistical, which I probably am. But I
mean, we are, but that's fine.
That's what makes it great. That's what makes us great. All right, we're going to close shop here at EHC, the podcast. We will be back talking about bullpen and anything else that pisses us off coming up soon. Happy spring break, Mike.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks.